Alright, hello everybody and welcome back to another Unreal Editor for Fortnite video. And today we are ready to go ahead and dive into some more advanced material topics. I'm going to be showing you all some of my favorite strategies for doing things inside of the editor and some more advanced material things to kind of create some cooler materials, because materials are pretty darn important when it comes to level design. So let's go ahead and get started. If you're unaware, make sure you watched my basics video where I talk about the basics of materials, what they are and how they work, and also watch the video on what a material instance is. So before you watch this video, you have to know how to create a material instance, what a parameter is inside of a base material, the advantages of material instances, and just the basics of what a material is and what a shader graph is. So if you know all of that and you didn't watch the other videos, you're good to go. If you didn't watch the other videos and you had no idea what I just said, please go watch the last two videos I just created. It should be number 3 and number 4 in the series. All right, cool. So let's go ahead here. I'm going to go ahead and just create a sphere just for our demonstration purposes here. Bam. All right, so there's our sphere, and I'm going to go ahead now and create a material for this sphere. So we're going to call this underscore tutorial again. And by the way, just for the record, I downloaded nothing. This is just straight up Unreal Editor for Fortnite, the blank template. So no excess textures. Everything in here should come with pretty much the starting content that comes with the Unreal Editor for Fortnite. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right in. And the first thing I want to talk about is tiling. What is tiling? Why is it important? Let's go ahead and give an example here. So I'm just going to go ahead and right click and just grab a basic texture sample. And let's just grab a random one. Let's just say this forest town stone floor. Okay, I'm not even going to set up the whole shader. I'm just going to connect this in, and I'm going to go ahead and save it. Hopefully it applies here in a second. There we go. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag it on my guy. And as you can see, this doesn't look bad. The big thing is that it's really, really big, right? What if I wanted these squares here to be really, really small? How would I do that? Well, essentially the way this works is just like anything, and I can actually even demonstrate this with a cube. Every single static mesh or thing that's just static in your scene, called a static mesh, it has a static mesh component. This is a static mesh actor with a static mesh component. Every single static mesh is made up of what we would call polygonal regions, right? And you can actually see what these look like in the modeling mode here. I'm going to go ahead and create a box here. As you can see, there are what we would call faces of the polygonal region, right? Let's come here to, where is the modeling mode? All right, polygroup edit, right? So as you can see, here's a face, here's a face, here's a face, and here's a face. So these are all faces that make up the 2D object. And you see what happens is when a texture is applied, Unreal is just going to put that texture on that face. But it doesn't know the scale in which it should put it on the face, right? It doesn't know whether it needs to be really, really small in scale or really large in scale. So oftentimes you get, without customization, you get textures that aren't, where the material isn't tiled very well, and this is a very good example of it, right? Where the texture is way too big for the material. So that's going to be the first thing we're going to look at, is how to fix that. We are going to use what's called a coordinate. A texture coordinate. This is what's going to allow us to change the tiling. And as you can see here in my details panel, I have these two little numbers here which allow me to customize how it's tiled. Right? Now, typically what you would generally do is I would technically grab a constant here, and then I would multiply these two together like this, and then ring out the result. So this is 1 here. I'll drag this out just like so, and bang. You have it set up here. Now, why did I do it this way? Because I generally want to convert this to a parameter, and I'll just call this tiling/offset. You can name this whatever you want, but this value here is going to indicate how much or how little this material, how small it is, or how big it is in comparison to the default value here. So as you can see, when I click save here, I'm now going to do what I talked about in the last video. I'm going to right click and create a new material instance. We'll call this mi_tutorial. Bam. I'm going to drag this in my material instances folder. Boom. I'm going to now apply that. But now I can come here to my graph and I can start to make them tiling different. And as you can see, that looks a lot better. If I wanted to make this 10, for example, that's starting to look a lot more like a tile floor rather than it just being, you know, massive tiles. Or I could just make it like one giant tile, right? If I made it 0.1, this is literally just one massive tile now, literally covering the whole ball, right? So this is one of the first techniques that if you want to get good at materials, you have to know how to do tiling. And generally speaking, this is the setup in the base material that you would use. If you want it to not be uniform, then I would recommend you would scale it here. You would set this to like 2 or 3, right? And then you would use this as the multiplier. But if you wanted it to be uneven, you would set this to like, I don't know, 10, for example, right? And that's going to make it very uneven, just depending on the situation. Typically, you want your U and V, or your X and Y, to kind of be the same length in most cases. Okay, so this is our first big topic here, is tiling. And as you can see, that's a good way to do it. All right, actually, let's go ahead and just keep all of this. The next thing we're going to talk about is how you can mix textures together. This is a very, very, very important technique to create really, really cool looking materials. You're never really just going to use one texture. You're generally going to want to blend multiple of them together. And how do we do that? Let me describe what this is called. It's called a lerp. Lerp stands for linear interpolation, right? Very big fancy word. It actually describes something very simple. So let's go ahead and look here. Before we do that, I'm going to open this up, and just for the record here, remember that every color is generally modeled after 3 numbers. Those 3 numbers represent the amount of red, green, and blue in a specific color, right? And if you combine that all together, the red value with the blue and the green value, you get a color. Okay, so what is lerping, or linear interpolation as it's called? Essentially, let's just say we have a coordinate plane here, and we have 3 numbers. Let's say this is the amount of red in a color, this is the amount of green in a color, and this is the amount of blue in a color. Okay, and we have some dots, which represents a specific amount of red, a specific amount of green, a specific amount of blue, right? And then let's say we have a different color here, over here, and let's say it has this amount of blue, this amount of red, and this amount of green. So we'll call this our 1 here. This will be our 1 dot, and then this will be our 2. What linear interpolation is essentially we take a line and we connect the 2 dots just like so. Boom. Okay? And then we have some value, right? This could be an alpha, this could be literally anything. And essentially we start at 1 and we go up the line till we meet 2. And how far up the line we go is dictated upon the value. So let's say the value here is equal to 0.5, for example. That would mean that the value we take would be halfway between the line here. If the value, let's say, was 0.7, then it would be more like here. If it was 1, so not even 0, like 1, then it would literally be here. And if it was 0, it would literally be here. So this value determines where along this line we are going to connect the 2. And this is one of the more important things because it allows you to blend the 2 colors together. So when you lerp or do linear interpolation, it's essentially a way to draw this line and then pick a value along this line that essentially mixes two things together. This is called linear interpolation, or in game development or 3D modeling, it's called lerping. This is what lerping is. Okay? All right, so let's look at that in action. Let's say I wanted to take this texture now, and let me actually grab something a little cooler. Let's grab a noise texture. So noise is one of the most used textures. And as you can see, this looks good, right? But if I just applied this here, it looks kind of like clouds, right? So if I wanted to change how this looked, I would come here and grab a color by holding 3 and clicking. And then I'm going to right click here and I'm going to type in lerp, which stands for linear interpolation. As you can see, I can click that here, and now I can drag this value here, and then I have an alpha, which describes how much of this versus this I'm going to have in my graph. I'm going to drag this into my base color like so, and now I can create a new number here called tint amount, or you could call this blend. A whole bunch of names this could take. I'll just call this tint amount. Again, parameters, give me name whatever you want, just make them so that other people can understand. And I'll right click on this and call this tint. This is generally called tint. You could also call this base color. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead, we'll set this to 0.5. And I'm gonna go ahead and drag this in like so. And as you can see, we have a little bit darker of a cloud here. If I came here and set this to 0, it would be none of the cloud texture. 0.2 would be some of it, very dark cloud, right? And I can come in here and start to alter the graph here, and it's going to alter the graph as we would expect. If I wanted more of the cloud texture, I would go 0.7 and I would get my nice little pink cloud here. Okay, so this is called lerping, and this is generally how you would blend multiple different textures together. It's one of the more important ones we should know. Okay, all right, cool. That was topic number 2, and this is the general material setup you would have for this. Of course, you could save this and then add it to the material instance and customize from there. So the next thing I want to talk about is the normal. Next to base color, I would say normal is probably the most important node to understand what it does. Okay, so back to the drawing board. Let's talk about what a normal is. In math land, a normal is a perpendicular vector. What in the world is that? Okay, let's say we have a surface. Okay, let's say it's even a 2D plane, right? And as I demonstrated in the video already, every object is made up of 2D shapes. Right? If you combine a whole bunch of 2D shapes together, you get a 3D mesh. The normal is the line that if I drew it would form a right angle with the plane. That's what the normal is. Okay? So if you ever normalize something, that's taking like a vector length and generally set it to 1, but it has to be with this right angle here. And essentially what I can do with the texture is I can essentially manipulate where this normal points. Now, why is this important? If I have a straight line here, and I want to change the normal from pointing here to, let's say I wanted it to point out this direction, well, that's no good because this is no longer a 90-degree angle. So what you have to actually do is you have to essentially push the texture up some, like this, and then because of that, this will now look, well, if I drew it perfectly, it would be more like a normal because I had to raise the texture up some, right? Now, you're probably looking at me like, how in the world do we raise up a texture and lower a texture? Well, remember, every single texture is made up of red, green, and blue, or the amount of red, green, and blue in an object. So if you add, like, let's say some red, it will create an illusion that there's a bump there. Or if you, like, got rid of certain colors, it would create an illusion that there was a divot there. And then with that divot, let's say right here, your normal is now pointing this way, which makes it look like there's an inherent bump in the texture. And this is essentially the idea of a normal map. It essentially allows you to add bumps and displacement, not necessarily like a displacement node in other softwares, but it allows you to add like divots and bumps and stuff like that into a texture to make it not look like wallpaper. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at a very good example of a normal. I'm going to go ahead and have this value here. And we're going to go ahead and just open up a normal map. So I'm going to grab a texture sample here. And I'm going to go ahead and get a normal. Just like so. And here's a default normal map. We'll actually just take this. And I'm now going to take my base color here. And we are going to go ahead and lerp this. Just like so. And I want this to be like 0.9-ish. That, for example, and we're going to drag this into the normal like this. Or actually, maybe I went the wrong direction. Maybe this needs to be like 0.2. There we go, starting to see it just a little bit there. Let me go ahead and maybe not this normal. We could apply this and probably see it, but let me actually go ahead and show you an example with some of the default textures here rather than try to procedurally make it. I'll procedurally make it in another video. Okay, all right. Oh, we wouldn't want that. This would come here like this now. Boom. There we go. And then this would also come here like that. So that way the tiling stays consistent. Boom. And then here, I'll probably let this down to like 0.2 or nope, 0.9-ish. There we go. So it has that pink tint. But do you see the normal is responsible for creating the divots here? I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the normal just for a second. To disconnect, you hold Alt and click. Right? You can clearly see the normal is creating. Did you see how this indented some? Let me go ahead and try and show you here. Do you see how there's more indentation here? Let me go ahead and save this and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here is my material graph. As you can see, it looks like it has like divots now in it, like these little divots here. If I get rid of this and save, those divots go away, and it's much more wallpaper-like. You see how there's no clear indentation here now. It looks much more like wallpaper, right? So this is what a normal map does. It creates indentation like that, and it's very subtle. Sometimes it's not so subtle, but in this case, it's a little bit more subtle, right? But as you can see here, there's now more indentation in the texture, and that's the responsibility of the normal. As you can see here, if I look here, it looks like there's a ring here. Okay? All right, so those are our couple little tricks for creating materials. It's very important to kind of know what those are, and those are used quite a bit. In the next video, I'm going to go ahead and create some custom materials, kind of using just those simple techniques. Again, that was just lerping, tiling, and manipulating the normal, so we can see just how you can create some custom materials. And again, I'm only using the things that come with the blank template. I'm not adding any more textures. Most of this is being done procedurally. So that should be a lot of fun for you all. But anyways, if this video helped you out in any way, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and I will see you all in the next one.